He changed the locks on a house I legally owned. When I showed up with my suitcase, he laughed in my face, told me to go cry to someone else, that this wasn't my home anymore. He thought I'd fall apart. He thought locking me out would break me. But while he was busy gloating on the porch, I was dialing my lawyer. No screaming, no begging, no drama. Just paperwork, just silence, just power. Because the deed had my name, the mortgage paid by me. He thought he could erase me with a new key. But I held the title the entire time. I used to believe that love meant sacrifice. That when someone was down, you helped them back up. That when someone you loved lost everything, you shared what you had even if it cost you everything. That's what I believed until I met Marcus. We met at a real estate seminar in Phoenix. He was charming, ambitious, and said all the right things. I'm a licensed realtor in Scottsdale, Arizona, so I wasn't new to people who know how to sell dreams. But Marcus, he sold me something else, a future. He talked about his app idea, his struggles after losing a business during COVID, and how all he needed was one shot. I didn't just see potential, I saw a partner, someone I could build with. So when he said he couldn't qualify for a mortgage because of his credit history, I offered to buy the house. Yes, the whole house. It was a modest 3-bedroom near Camelback Mountain. He picked it. I closed the deal. It was under my name, my income, my down payment, my documents. Marcus didn't even attend the closing, but to him it was our home. At first, things felt like a dream. He cooked. He fixed things around the house. We binge-watched late-night shows on the patio. I thought, maybe, just maybe, I'd finally built a life worth keeping. But then came the comments. Why do you still work so late? Do you really need to wear that to show a house? Maybe I should take over the finances, help you manage your stress. It started as suggestions, became criticisms, and then control. He changed the Wi-Fi password and didn't tell me. He started driving my car without asking. He stopped paying for groceries because I was the one making the money anyway. And every time I said something, he flipped it, said I was ungrateful or too independent to be in a real relationship. I started sleeping with one eye open. My home, the home I bought, didn't feel like mine anymore. But I stayed because love is patient, right? Because people go through phases, right? Because I didn't want to feel like a failure again. One afternoon, I had a long day at work. 3 showings, 1 difficult client, and a tire blowout on the freeway. I came home sweaty, hungry, and just wanting a shower. But my key wouldn't work. At first, I thought I turned it wrong. Tried again. Then again. Nothing. I knocked, rang the bell, texted Marcus. No answer. Then the porch light turned on. He walked out, shirtless, holding a drink, and smirking. Oh, you're back, he said. What's going on, I asked. Why doesn't my key work? He took a sip from his glass. Changed the locks. My mouth went dry. Excuse me. This house, he said, pointing to the walls like he owned them, is not a hotel. You don't just come and go. I live here, I shouted. I bought this house. This is my house. He laughed, a full, deep, humiliating laugh. Yeah, prove it? Then he walked back inside, closed the door. I stood there, stunned, holding a work bag and a dead phone, my heels digging into the tile, my chest on fire. A neighbor came out. Everything okay, hun? I smiled, lied, said yes. But in my mind, something clicked. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I drove back to my office. I printed the deed, the title, the payment history, all under my name. And I called my lawyer. I told her everything. And she said the most beautiful words I'd heard all year. He doesn't own a single brick of that home. Let's get him out. That night, I booked a hotel, slept like a baby. Because I knew something he didn't. He thought locking me out was the end. But I was about to teach him. This story hadn't even started. The next morning, I arrived at my lawyer's office with a folder so thick it looked like a small novel. Deed, title insurance, tax records, mortgage statements, every document had my name, not his. My lawyer, Dana, flipped through the pages with a smirk that made me feel, for the first time in weeks, like I wasn't crazy. This, she said, tapping the deed, isn't just a house, this is leverage. I exhaled. I didn't even realize I'd been holding my breath since last night. Dana explained the process a legal eviction. Yes, even though he had no ownership. He'd been residing there long enough that we couldn't just call the cops to throw him out without a judge's order. But she assured me we had every advantage. We'll file today, she said. Let the court system do the yelling for you. That sentence, it wrapped around me like armor. Because for so long, Marcus had been the loud one, the dramatic one, the manipulative one. But now I had the law on my side. I left Dana's office and drove to the house, to my house. Not to confront him, not to argue. I just wanted to see it. It was strange, sitting in my car across the street, watching him water plants in a garden I planted. He looked calm, like he had no idea what was coming. And I realized something. He really believed he'd won. He thought changing the locks made him untouchable. That by embarrassing me, belittling me, isolating me, that he could erase me. But you can't erase what's etched in ink. You can't steal what was never yours. That evening, I went home to my temporary apartment. It was small, but peaceful. Quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't ask for explanations. The next few days moved quickly. Dana filed the unlawful detainer. Marcus was served by a sheriff's deputy, right at the door. I wasn't there to see it, but I heard from a neighbor that he tried to sweet-talk the officer. Must be a misunderstanding, he'd said. I live here. My girlfriend just moved out. But paperwork doesn't blink. Paperwork doesn't fall for charm. And 2 weeks later, we had our hearing. I showed up in a navy blue blazer, hair pinned back, folder in hand. Marcus arrived late, in a wrinkled t-shirt, acting like the victim. He tried to spin the story, said I abandoned the house, that I gave it to him, but the judge wasn't buying it. Do you have any ownership documents? The judge asked. Marcus stuttered, then looked at me, then said, no. But she said, the judge raised a hand. This isn't about what was said. This is about what's signed. I handed over the deed. The judge reviewed it, nodded, then looked at Marcus. You have 7 days to vacate. After that, a lockout will be enforced. Boom! Done? I wanted to look over at Marcus to see his reaction, but I didn't. He wasn't worth it. Outside the courtroom, I called Dana. She was already preparing the paperwork for the sheriff. 7 days. I marked the calendar like it was a countdown to freedom. And each day, I got stronger. I bought new furniture, repainted my vision board, called a locksmith the Myth locksmith, because I wasn't just taking my house back. I was reclaiming my space, my peace, my self-worth. On the morning of the lockout, I met the sheriff in front of the house. It was early 7 a.m., and the desert air still held its nighttime chill. Marcus answered the door shirtless again. Only this time, he wasn't smiling. The sheriff explained everything, gave him 15 minutes to gather essentials. He protested, tried to argue, but the badge ended every sentence. He shoved some clothes in a bag, slammed drawers, called me names under his breath. I didn't respond. Didn't flinch, didn't move, just stood on the sidewalk, arms crossed, watching the last few pieces of his illusion fall apart. When he walked past me with his bag, he paused. You think this makes you better? He sneered. I looked him in the eye for the first time in weeks. No, I said, it makes me whole. He walked away. No grand exit, no final word, just silence. The sheriff handed me the keys. It's yours now, ma'am. Lock it up however you like. And when I stepped inside, it felt like breathing after drowning. Same walls, same furniture, but everything felt new. I opened windows, let in light, threw out every trace of him. Even the stupid lava lamp he insisted was vintage. Then I walked to the front door and changed the locks back. Not because I was afraid he'd come back, but because this time I held the key, and no one was ever going to lock me out of my own life again. You would think that winning in court would feel like the end, like closure, but it didn't. It felt like a door had been opened, one I didn't even know existed. Because once Marcus was gone, and the keys were mine again, I finally had time to breathe, to walk through each room and let the silence speak, to trace my fingers across the kitchen counter and remember how I used to dream of cooking Sunday breakfast for someone who loved me back. Instead, I found myself wiping down cabinets he'd never cleaned, pulling his old things from closets like they were toxins that needed purging. The first week, I lived in sweatpants, no makeup, no mirrors. I didn't want to be seen, not even by myself, because underneath the legal victory was something deeper, a grief I hadn't expected. Grief for the woman I'd been, the one who bent over backwards for love that wasn't real, the one who gave too much, stayed too long, and believed too easily. There were nights I sat on the floor in the living room, knees tucked to my chest, just listening, to the AC hum, the creak of wood, the quiet. And there, in that stillness, I started talking to myself. Not out loud, but in my head. You are not stupid. You are not weak. You are not broken. Every time I walked past the new locks, I touched them. Not for safety, for reassurance, because I needed to remind myself I chose this. I fought for this. And I won. Still, even with Marcus gone, his fingerprints lingered. On my habits, my thoughts, my fears. I would jump when a door slammed, hesitate before entering my own bedroom, flinch when my phone buzzed. So I did what I knew best. I made a list, not of tasks, but of healing. 1, get rid of his things. 2, replace the curtains. 3, plant something new in the garden. 4, reclaim the space. The next day, I hired a junk removal service. They came with gloves and carts and asked no questions. By the afternoon, every trace of Marcus had been hauled away in a rattling truck. I stood on the driveway and watched it disappear down the road, and I smiled. Then I went inside, opened a bottle of wine, and toasted the empty hallway. To square one, I whispered, but this time, it's mine. I called Dana the next morning, told her I wanted to update the title. She laughed. You already own it, remember? I know, I said, but now I want it recorded in all caps. She chuckled again. You're the only person I know who wants a victory printed like a headline. Exactly. Because this wasn't just paperwork. This was proof. Proof that I could lose myself and find her again. I started to change things slowly. Painted the living room sage green, calming, fresh, mine. Bought a new couch that didn't sag like his mood swings. Hung up art that didn't match anything except how I felt. One night, while replacing a light bulb in the hallway, I found an old box shoved behind the insulation panel. Inside photos of us, of me sleeping, of the house before I moved in. I felt a cold ripple down my back. Because some of those pictures I'd never seen before. I stared at one photo me at the kitchen sink, hair wet, robe half open. Taken through the back window, he'd been watching me, photographing me. Without my knowledge, my knees buckled. I sat on the floor, the box in my lap, heart thudding like it wanted to break through my ribs. The victory, the court date, the lockout, none of it prepared me for this. For how deeply I'd been invaded. Violated, used. I called Dana again. Is there anything I can do? I asked. She was quiet. Then not legally, unless he tries to come back. But if he does, we'll bury him in injunctions. I didn't sleep that night, but by morning something had shifted. I packed the photos back in the box. Not to keep, but to remind myself never again. I dropped the box off at the police department. Told them I found it cleaning up after an ex. They logged it, no promises, but I felt lighter walking out. 2 weeks passed. Then one afternoon, I saw a car parked across the street. Windows tinted, engine running. I watched from the window for 30 minutes. It didn't move. I grabbed my phone, snapped a picture, sent it to Dana. She replied, "Document. Don't engage. Call me if it happens again." The car didn't return, but something inside me did. A fire, a spark. I wasn't going to live in fear of shadows. Not in my house. So I started walking the neighborhood again, head high, shoulders back. Neighbors waved, smiled, said they were glad to see me. One of them, a kind widow named Lorraine, brought over cookies. Said she'd seen everything. Said she was proud of me. I cried that night. Not because I was sad, but because someone saw me. The real me. The me who didn't scream or beg. The me who fought back in silence, with strategy and on paper. And every time I locked the door at night, I whispered, "This is mine. Not the house. The peace. The power. The woman I fought to become." Somewhere between silence and sunlight, I started becoming someone new. Not the woman who got locked out. Not the one who wept on the front porch while a man claimed her walls, her floors, her life. But someone sharper, still, certain. Because healing doesn't just arrive. It walks in slowly on blistered feet, wearing yesterday's clothes, and dragging truth behind it like a heavy coat. And one afternoon, that truth came knocking. I was going through the last of the boxes in the garage when I found it a stack of unopened mail shoved behind a workbench Marcus had claimed as his man corner. Bills, junk, but also letters. From women. At first, I thought they were just spam, maybe some business cards or apartment leasing ads. But then I opened one. "Thanks for the weekend. Hope she didn't notice. I still have your jacket. Call me when she's gone." My stomach turned to ice. I opened another. "You said she'd be out by now. Did she change her mind? I want to come over this weekend." There were six different women, 6 different lies, all dated while we were together, while I was paying the mortgage, while he was changing my locks and stealing my dignity. I sat on the cold cement floor, letters fanned out like proof in a trial I didn't know I was attending. And then I laughed, a deep, painful, guttural laugh. 'Cause of course he wasn't just a manipulator, he was a parasite. He hadn't just fed off my kindness. He multiplied his betrayal, quietly, casually, like it was normal, like I was the side note in my own home. But this wasn't about heartbreak anymore. It was about clarity. So I gathered every letter, every lie, and I burned them. Out on the patio, under the Arizona sun, ashes floated like tiny ghosts, dissolving in the breeze. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it for ritual. A cleansing. After that day, everything moved forward. My career soared. I landed 3 new clients who'd seen my legal story shared on a realtor forum. Turns out, standing your ground is good business. I was invited to speak on a podcast about property rights and female ownership. I told my story. Not with anger, but with authority. People listened. DMs poured in from other women, some locked out of homes they paid for, some silenced by shame, some just grateful that someone said it out loud. And then something unexpected happened. I got a letter, not from a lover, from Marcus, handwritten, no return address. I stared at it for days before opening it. Inside, his words tried to crawl back into my life. He didn't apologize. Not really. He said he'd been lost, that he missed our home, and that he wished things had gone differently. He even asked if we could meet for closure. Closure, like the kind he gave me when he turned off the porch light and left me standing in the dark. I folded the letter, placed it in my filing cabinet, under proof of closure. 'Cause here's the truth. I didn't need his apology. I already had my justice, and I wasn't interested in resurrecting corpses. Weeks passed. One evening, I sat on the front steps, sipping tea, watching the sky melt from gold to navy. Lorraine, my neighbor, joined me. "You look lighter," she said. "I feel lighter," I replied. She handed me a small gift, a tiny ceramic key with the words "Welcome Home" etched across it. "I thought it was just cute," she smiled, "but I think it belongs to you." I held it in my palm. It was warm from her hand, fragile but firm, just like me. I thanked her, hugged her, and after she left, I brought it inside, hung it by the front door. The next day, I hosted a small gathering, just a few close friends, some wine, and music that made the walls dance. No speeches, no explanations, just joy. One of my friends pulled me aside. "You know what I admire most," she said. I smiled. "My impeccable wine selection." She laughed. "No, the fact that you never stooped, you didn't go online and drag him. You didn't make it a war, you just took back what was yours, quietly." I nodded, because that was the point. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it signs a document. Sometimes it shows up to court in heels and a navy blazer. Sometimes it says nothing at all and just waits for the gavel to fall. As the night faded and the last guest left, I stood in the middle of my living room. Lights low, music gone. And I breathed a deep, slow, victorious breath. Because I had done something extraordinary. I had survived someone trying to erase me without becoming invisible. I didn't just get my house back. I got myself back. Every scar, every sigh, every silent moment, it had all led here. To a woman who no longer apologized for existing. To a woman who once knocked on a locked door and now held all the keys. And as I turned off the light, I whispered to the darkness, the same darkness that once held me hostage. "You can't scare me anymore. 6 months." That's how long it had been since Marcus was evicted, since I stood on the edge of my own driveway, holding a set of keys that finally belonged in my hands, not because someone gave them to me, but because I earned them, because I fought for them, because I signed for them. And now, half a year later, I was no longer the woman who had been locked out. I was the woman who built something stronger, not just a home, but a fortress. Not with bricks or alarms or walls, but with boundaries, with wisdom, with a name on every document, and a heart that no longer needed permission to exist. I had turned the house into a business, listed it as a luxury rental for traveling professionals. It booked out fast. Turns out people love the mix of warmth and independence. Each month, the payments rolled in silent affirmations that I was no longer surviving, but thriving. I used the profits to buy a second property across town. Smaller, cozier, mine. That's where I live now. No ghosts, no games, just peace. The kind you can taste in your morning coffee, the kind you feel in the spaces between breaths. But I didn't forget, because forgetting isn't healing. It's erasing, and I didn't want to erase what happened. I wanted to remember it correctly, not as a tragedy, but as a turning point. So when the podcast I'd appeared on months ago asked me back for a follow-up, I said yes. I sat in a quiet studio, mic in front of me, headphones snug against my ears. The host smiled. "We've had dozens of messages about your episode. Women said it helped them walk away. Some said it saved their lives." I blinked back, the warmth rising in my chest. "Then it was worth it," I said. She leaned in. "What would you say to someone right now, someone listening, who's standing on the other side of a locked door?" I closed my eyes, saw myself again, suitcase in hand, tears welling, anger rising, hope flickering, and I said, "Don't waste your breath banging on a door someone locked behind you. Walk away, find the paperwork, find the truth, and come back when you don't need to knock, when you own the damn key." The host grinned. The episode went viral, and the messages poured in. I started getting invited to speak at conferences, women's shelters, property seminars. Each time, I shared the story not of Marcus, but of me, of how I didn't fight fire with fire. I fought it with facts, of how silence was my sword, and documents were my armor. And one day, after giving a keynote speech about legal ownership and financial independence, a woman approached me. She was older, late 50s, eyes tired but kind. "I wish I'd heard your story 20 years ago," she said. "I lost everything, trusted the wrong man, never got it back." I took her hand. "You're still here," I said. "That means it's not too late to build again." She cried. So did I. 'Cause that's what healing does. It reaches backward too, not to stay there but to lift others out. Months passed. One morning, while checking my rental listings, I saw a booking request from a man named Marcus. I froze. Checked the profile. Same name, same face, but a different city. He had no idea the property was mine. I stared at the screen for a long time. My finger hovered over decline. But then I smiled and clicked accept, because this wasn't revenge. This was poetry. The man who once locked me out, would now pay to stay in a house I owned. He arrived 2 weeks later, didn't recognize me when we crossed paths outside. He smiled politely, asked where the best breakfast spot was. I pointed him to Lorraine's niece's cafe down the block, and I watched him walk away. No drama, no recognition, just a man holding luggage, and a woman holding history rewritten. When he checked out, he left a 5-star review, said the house felt secure, empowering, and full of light. I printed that review and framed it, hung it in my office, right next to my property deed. Every time I look at it, I'm reminded of how full circle life can be, of how sometimes the quietest victories echo the loudest. And that's where my story ends. Not with a scream, not with a slammed door, but with keys in my hand, and a heart no longer asking for permission. Because the truth is, he changed the locks. But I owned the property, legally and spiritually and entirely